In 2431, that's how many documented targets Rebecca Winters eliminated as a Delta Force sniper before trading her scope for soil samples. Now she runs Silver Creek Ranch in Thunder Valley, Montana, raising her twins and coaxing life from land most folks called worthless. When the Crimson Riders motorcycle gang rolled into town, they saw what everyone else saw. Just another struggling single mother on a dying farm. One more piece of land, ripe for taking. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They should have noticed how she tested soil samples with military precision, counted the way her eyes swept the horizon in perfect 5-second intervals, even while discussing crop rotation at the farmer's market. Their mistake wasn't threatening her property. Their mistake wasn't even threatening her children. Their mistake was giving a former Delta Force operative who'd eliminated high-value targets across 4 continents a reason to remember exactly who she used to be. In Thunder Valley, some battles aren't won by those with the most firepower, but by those who've spent 15 years learning how to eliminate threats before they even know their targets. Dawn painted the Sapphire Mountains in shades of amber as Rebecca Winters checked the perimeter fence along her eastern property line. Her calloused hands moved with practiced efficiency, testing each post with the same precision she once used to maintain her Barrett M82. The morning frost still clung to the winter wheat field, stretching toward Eagle Peak, but she'd already completed 2 surveillance sweeps of the property. "Mom!" 10-year-old Emma's voice carried across the field as she ran toward her, dark braids flying behind her. Mrs. Henderson from the general store called, said there were some scary-looking bikers asking questions about our place last night. Rebecca's expression remained neutral, but her eyes automatically catalogued potential defensive positions. What kind of questions? About who owns it, about bank payments. Emma caught her breath. She said they weren't normal bikers, had these weird patches, looked organized. 8-year-old Jack appeared from behind the barn, their Belgian Malinois. Atlas at his heels. "Mom, Atlas has been acting weird since sunrise, like when those wolves were stalking the sheep last month." Rebecca knelt to scratch behind Atlas's ears, noting the dog's elevated alertness. Her mind was already calculating sightlines, identifying choke points, remembering lessons learned in places she'd never discuss. "Go help your sister with morning chores, buddy. I need to make a supply run." Henderson's general store sat at Thunder Valley's main intersection, a weathered wooden building that had served the community for 4 generations. Margaret Henderson looked up as Rebecca entered, her worried expression confirming what Emma had reported. "Heard you had some visitors last night, Margaret. 6 of them." Margaret lowered her voice, though the store was empty. "Crimson Riders MC. They're moving north from Idaho, taking over small towns, local businesses, farms, especially ones struggling with mortgage payments." Rebecca maintained her casual stance, but her mind was already mapping fields of fire, identifying tactical advantages, and calculating response times. "Anyone else they've visited?" "Peterson Place last week. Old man refused to sell. Next day his grain silo collapsed. Equipment failure, according to the insurance report." The bell above the door chimed. Sarah Cooper, their elderly neighbor, hurried in with unusual urgency. "Rebecca, thank goodness. You need to see this." They followed Sarah outside. A black motorcycle cruised past, its rider making no effort to hide his surveillance. The Crimson Rider's patch on his leather cut caught the morning sun. "That's the 4th pass this morning," Sarah whispered. "They're watching, dear, like they did before the Peterson incident." Rebecca squeezed Sarah's hand, reassuringly. "Don't worry about me. Just keep an eye on the kids if they're ever in town alone." "Of course, dear, though I suspect you can handle yourself better than you let on." Sarah's knowing look made Rebecca wonder, not for the first time, how much the observant older woman had figured out Back at Silver Creek, Rebecca found Emma and Jack finishing their chores. Her daughter's tense posture showed she'd spotted the motorcycle too. "Mum, are we in trouble because of the bank payments?" Rebecca pulled both children close. "No one's taking this ranch. It's been in our family for 4 generations, and it'll stay that way." "But those men," Jack started. "Some people think being scary gives them power," Rebecca interrupted gently. "But real strength comes from protecting what matters, not threatening others." She sent them inside, then walked the property's perimeter. Her trained eyes spotted 4 more surveillance positions where bikers had watched the ranch. Their boot prints showed military-style tactical positioning. These weren't just random thugs. In the barn, Rebecca moved the false wall she'd installed. Behind old hay bales, the hidden compartment contained everything she'd hoped to never use again: her customized M110 sniper rifle, tactical gear, and enough ammunition to hold off a small army. She built this cache the day she bought the ranch, praying her past would never catch up with her. The sound of approaching motorcycles carried across the valley. Rebecca quickly sealed the compartment and emerged from the barn. 6 bikes rumbled past her property, their riders watching openly now. She recognized their patches from Margaret's description: Crimson Riders, MC, the most notorious outlaw gang in 5 states. The lead rider, a tall man with a scarred face and blood stitched on his cut, slowed to a stop. His cold smile carried a clear threat. "Nice place you got here, lady. Shame if something happened to it." Rebecca met his gaze calmly, her stance relaxed but balanced. "Private property. Best move along." Just being neighborly. His grin widened. "Times are hard for small farms. Banks get impatient, accidents happen. But we look after our friends, provide protection for a reasonable fee." "Not interested." Blood's expression hardened. "Everyone's interested eventually. Ask Peterson how." Refusing worked out for him. They roared away in a cloud of dust, but Rebecca knew this was just the beginning. She watched them disappear around the bend, her mind already formulating plans. The Crimson Riders thought they'd found an easy target, a struggling single mother they could intimidate and destroy. They had no idea they'd just threatened someone who'd spent 15 years learning how to eliminate threats exactly like them. Rebecca had left that life behind for her children, built something peaceful. But if the Crimson Riders forced her hand, they'd learn why some predators are better at hiding in plain sight than others. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside the house, Rebecca found Jack watching through the window. "Are the bad men coming back?" She hugged him close, remembering all the reasons she'd chosen this quiet life. "Don't worry about them, sweetheart. Mom's got everything under control." But as evening fell over Silver Creek Ranch, more motorcycles passed on the distant road. Rebecca counted 8 different riders conducting surveillance, their patterns suggesting professional training. The Crimson Riders weren't just random outlaws. They were organized, experienced, and used to getting their way. Rebecca put her children to bed, then sat on the porch, cleaning her Remington 870, the legal one. She kept for coyotes, not the M110 hidden in the barn. Tomorrow, she'd drive into town, talk to Sheriff Davidson, and try handling this through proper channels. But as she watched more bikes pass in the growing darkness, she knew peaceful solutions were becoming less likely. The Crimson Riders were about to learn that some threats shouldn't be judged by their appearance. Some battles aren't won by those with the most force, but by those who've spent decades learning the art of making predators become prey. Sheriff Michael Davidson's office smelled of coffee and gun oil, its walls lined with fading wanted posters and community service awards. The old lawman listened as Rebecca detailed the Crimson Rider's visits, his weathered face growing darker with each detail. "Same pattern as Pine Ridge and Millbrook?" he said finally. They move in slow, target-vulnerable properties. By the time people realize what's happening, they own half the town. I'm not selling, Rebecca stated firmly. But I'd rather handle this legally first. Davidson sighed. I'll increase patrols, but I'm short-staffed. And these guys, they're smart, never leave enough evidence for charges. The Thunder Valley Diner's breakfast crowd fell silent as 4 Crimson Riders motorcycles pulled up outside. Rebecca watched. Through the window as Blood dismounted, followed by his lieutenants Razor and Chain. They'd chosen their moment well. She'd just dropped Jack at school. Well, look who it is. Blood slid into the booth across from her. Thought about our offer? Still not interested. Rebecca sipped her coffee calmly. 10,000 a month keeps your ranch safe. Razor leaned against the booth. Cheap compared to rebuilding after an accident. Is threatening women and children how you usually start your morning? Jake Miller's voice carried across the diner. The local mechanic moved with the distinctive gait of someone who'd seen combat. His prosthetic, like a souvenir from Iraq. Stay out of this, Chain growled. Rebecca caught the nearly imperceptible shift in Jake's weight, a fighter's preparation. She spoke before things escalated. We're done here. I have work to do. She stood, but Chain grabbed her arm. What happened next was too fast for most observers to follow. Rebecca simply moved, using his own grip against him. Suddenly, Chain was sitting, nursing a wrist that was bent at an uncomfortable angle. Don't touch me again, she said quietly, then walked out. Dr. Amy Chen arrived that afternoon to check on a pregnant mare. The veterinarian worked efficiently, but Rebecca noticed her studying the fresh motorcycle tracks near the barn. Heard about the diner? Amy said casually. That move you used looked like military training. Self-defense class at the community center. Amy's knowing smile suggested she wasn't convinced. Must have been some class. My sister was force recon. She used similar techniques. Their conversation was interrupted by Atlas's warning bark. 2 Crimson Riders' bikes circled the property, their riders carrying suspicious objects. Get inside, Rebecca instructed Amy, already moving. She reached the fence line just as one rider prepared to throw what looked like a Molotov cocktail. Rebecca's warning shot with the legal shotgun struck dirt near their bikes. The riders swerved, dropping their weapons, which shattered harmlessly. In the field. Next one won't miss, she called out. The bikes roared away, but she knew they'd be back. Amy emerged from the barn. Self-defense class teaches you to shoot like that too. Lucky shot. Amy packed her medical bag. You know, my sister runs a veteran support group in town, if you ever want to talk about self-defense classes. That evening, Rebecca found Emma practicing with her softball bat behind the barn, her daughter's swings carrying focused anger. Those men at the diner, Emma said without stopping. They're not going to leave us alone, are they? No, honey, but we're not leaving either. I'm not scared. Emma hit another ball. I saw how you handled that guy, like it was nothing. Rebecca watched her daughter's determined practice. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones making threats, they're the ones protecting what matters. Is that what you did? Before we moved here. Before Rebecca could answer, Atlas's bark warned of approaching vehicles. Multiple motorcycles stopped at their gate, Blood himself dismounting with Razor and Wolf flanking him. Last chance, Blood called out. 20,000 a month now. Price goes up every time we have to ask again. Rebecca positioned herself between the bikers and Emma. You're trespassing. Leave. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Blood's scarred face twisted. Accidents happen to kids too. Roads aren't safe these days. Rebecca's voice carried a deadly quiet. Threatening my children is the last mistake you'll ever make. Something in her tone made Wolf step back. Even Blood's confidence wavered briefly. Think it over, he said finally. Tomorrow's deadline. After that, we stopped being nice. As the bikes roared away, Rebecca heard Jake's truck approaching. The veteran mechanic pulled up, his expression grim. Saw them heading this way. Thought you might want some company. Thanks, Jake, but I can handle them. No doubt about that. He studied her stance. You know, the way you move, the way you handle yourself, reminds me of some operators I served with, special forces types. Rebecca met his knowing look. Just a farmer protecting her land, Jake nodded slowly. Well, this farmer might want to know that Blood's crew is moving heavy tonight. 50 bikes at least, coming up from their compound. Word is they're done negotiating. Atlas's bark caught their attention. More motorcycles passed on the distant road, their riders conducting surveillance with military precision. The Crimson. Riders were done playing games. Rebecca watched them disappear into the gathering dusk. She tried handling this legally, tried protecting her cover. But as she counted the increasing number of bikes circling her property like vultures, she knew tomorrow would bring hard choices. Some battles can't be won through peaceful means. Sometimes protecting what you love means becoming what you left behind. The Crimson Riders thought numbers and intimidation guaranteed victory. They were about to learn why some predators are better at hiding in plain sight than others. Rebecca woke to Atlas's low growl an hour before dawn. The dog's ears were focused on the eastern approach, where the first hint of morning painted the sky in dark blues. She'd been expecting this. The Crimson Riders always attacked at first light. "Emma," she called softly, finding her daughter already dressed. "Take Jack to Sarah's. Use the creek path like we practiced. I can help fight. You help by keeping. Your brother's safe." Rebecca checked the legal shotgun. "Remember what I taught you about watching the tree line. Stay low, use cover, count 5 seconds between movements," Emma recited. "Mom, be careful." Jack appeared, backpack ready, Atlas at his side. The boy's eyes were scared but determined. "The bad men are coming, aren't they?" Rebecca hugged them, both. "Everything's going to be fine. Sarah's expecting you." Atlas led her children toward the hidden creek path as the first rumble of motorcycles carried across the valley. Rebecca counted engines by sound, at least 30 approaching from the main road, another group from the north. More than expected. Quite the army they brought. Jake's voice came from behind the barn. The veteran mechanic emerged with his own shotgun. "Thought you could use backup. You shouldn't be here, Jake. Neither should they." He checked his weapon with practiced efficiency. Besides, some fights matter more than others. The first wave of Crimson Riders roared through her front gate, led by Razor and Wolf. Rebecca noted their tactical approach, standard military flanking pattern. These weren't just thugs on bikes. "Last chance, lady," Razor's voice carried across the pre-dawn darkness. "Sign over the ranch or we burn it all." Rebecca's response was a warning shot that kicked up dirt near their front tires. The bikes scattered, their riders taking covered positions with practiced coordination. "They're ex-military," Jake observed, moving in fire teams. I noticed Rebecca was already moving to higher ground, remembering countless similar operations from her past life. "Watch the barn's blind spot." More bikes arrived, surrounding the farmhouse. Blood himself appeared, directing his men with hand signals Rebecca recognized from combat training. "Burn it," he ordered. "Burn it all." Molotov cocktails arced through the early light. Rebecca's shot struck 2 in midair, while Jake's blast caught another, but one got through, setting the edge of the wheat field ablaze. Fire team moving on. "You're 3," Jake called out. Rebecca pivoted, catching 3 riders trying to flank her position. Her shotgun's pump action dropped 2, while the 3rd scrambled for cover. Every shot was carefully placed, disabling without killing. "You've done this before," Jake commented between reloads. "So have they." Rebecca spotted more tactical movements in her peripheral vision. They were pushing toward the house. Razor led the next assault team, their approach showing clear military training. But Rebecca had spent years teaching soldiers like them. She used their own tactics against them, drawing them into prepared fields of fire. "Ladies got skills," Wolf shouted to Blood. This ain't no normal farmer. Shut up and push. Forward, Blood commanded. We've got numbers. But numbers meant nothing against experience. Rebecca's counterattacks forced them to waste ammunition, to bunch up in predictable patterns. Jake provided perfect covering fire, his own combat experience evident. The sound of sirens carried from town. Sheriff Davidson's deputies were finally responding, but Rebecca knew they'd never arrive in time. Time running low, Jake reported, his shotgun running dry. Martha's root cellar, Rebecca directed. Go through the creek path. Leave you here? Not happening. A new sound cut through the gunfire. Sarah Cooper's ancient truck roaring up the back road, the old woman handling it like a rally driver. She skidded to a stop behind the barn. Need a ride? Sarah called out cheerfully. Brought something that might help too. She pulled out Rebecca's gun case, the hidden one from the barn. Rebecca's eyes widened. Found it while cleaning last spring, Sarah explained. Figured you had your reasons. Thought today might be the day. Rebecca retrieved her M110 sniper rifle, the familiar weight settling into her hands. Time to stop playing defense. Who are you? Jake asked, real awe in his voice. Just a farmer protecting her land. Rebecca moved to higher ground, 15 years of training taking over. Through her scope, she picked out Blood's position, coordinating his men with military hand signals. Time to change the game. Her first shot disabled Blood's bike, the Precise, round striking the engine block. The second shot took Razor's radio, cutting their communications. Each pull of the trigger demonstrated years of expert training. She's Special Forces. Wolf's panicked voice carried across the farm. Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos, cold and professional. You have 30 seconds to clear my property. Anyone still here after that becomes a target. Your choice. The Crimson Riders broke formation, scrambling for their bikes. Even Blood recognized the shift in power, mounting his disabled motorcycle and pushing it manually. This isn't over, he shouted, but fear had replaced his usual confidence. Actually, Rebecca settled her scope on. His position it is. Her final shot struck the ground at his feet with sniper precision, a clear message about what she could have hit instead. As the raiders retreated in chaos, Sarah and Jake returned. The old woman looked completely unruffled by the morning's excitement. Well, Sarah smiled. That was more interesting than bingo night. Jake studied the precision shots Rebecca had placed. Delta Force? That's classified. But Rebecca's slight smile confirmed his guess. Mom. Emma and Jack emerged from the creek path, Atlas bounding ahead to check on her. Rebecca hugged her children close, breathing in their safety, but she knew this wasn't over. The Crimson Riders would be back, with greater numbers and better preparation. You should have told me, Jake said quietly, about your background. I could have helped sooner. Wasn't your fight? It is now. He gestured toward town, where more trucks were arriving. Locals coming to help, drawn by the sound of battle. Something tells me we're all in this together. Rebecca watched the smoke clear from her wheat field, calculating what would come next. The Crimson Riders had just learned she was more than a simple farmer, but they hadn't seen anything yet. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators are the ones hiding in plain sight, and Rebecca Winters had spent 15 years becoming very, very good at remaining invisible until the perfect moment to strike. The Thunder Valley diner buzzed with barely contained excitement as Rebecca assessed the damage reports. 3 local farms hit in the last hour, all families who'd come to help defend her property. The Crimson Riders were sending a message: stand together, fall together. Thompson Place got it worse, Margaret Henderson reported grimly. Barns gone, equipment destroyed, but Bill's still standing with us. They're changing tactics, Jake observed, his military experience showing. These weren't intimidation hits. This was strategic targeting. Rebecca studied the map, spread across their table, marking attack patterns. The raiders weren't just being vengeful. They were isolating key properties, cutting supply lines between allied farms. Mom, Emma approached Jack. Atlas is acting weird again, but different this time. Rebecca checked her watch. They're watching us, planning their next move. Dr. Amy Chen slipped into the booth, laying down a thick folder. You need to see this. Hospital records from 3 counties revealed a pattern. Property seized through intimidation became distribution points. Local businesses turned into money laundering operations. The Crimson Riders weren't just a gang, they were an organized, criminal enterprise with military precision. Blood was special forces too, Amy added quietly. Different branch, different war, but he knows what he's doing. Sarah Cooper arrived with fresh coffee, her calm demeanor unchanged by the morning's violence. Rebecca, dear, perhaps it's time to tell them everything about what you did before farming. The diner fell silent. Rebecca met each person's eyes, measuring trust against necessity. Delta Force, she said finally. 15 years, most of it classified. I was a sniper, one of their best. We know, Sheriff Davidson's voice carried from the door. Known since you bought the ranch. Your background. Check was interesting. Why didn't you say anything? Same reason you didn't. Some skills are best kept hidden until needed. He laid his badge on the table. County commissioners ordered me to shut this down, saying we're provoking the riders. They're bought, Jake concluded. Whole states compromised. But I'm not retiring quietly. Davidson smiled grimly. Time to choose sides. Rebecca's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. She recognized the tactical coordinates. Blood was calling a meeting. He wants to talk, she announced. Neutral ground, just him and me. It's a trap, Jake warned. Of course it is. Rebecca stood. That's why I need you all to understand what comes next. She detailed her plan, drawing on decades of special operations experience. Each listener had a role, veterans like Jake providing tactical support, Sarah coordinating civilian resources, Amy monitoring medical needs. They think hitting our farms makes us vulnerable, Rebecca concluded. Time to show them how wrong they are. The meeting point was Eagle Peak Overlook, providing clear views of the valley below. Rebecca arrived early, identifying sniper positions where Blood's men waited. Impressive setup, Blood emerged from the shadows. 3 kill teams, overlapping fields of fire, almost perfect. 4th team on the ridge gives it away, Rebecca replied calmly. Sloppy positioning. Blood's scarred face showed genuine respect. Delta Force should have recognized the training. We're not so different, you and I. I protect people, she countered. You prey on them. I offer order, structure. These towns are dying anyway. We give them purpose by destroying families, burning homes, by reminding them that strength is all that matters. Blood moved with deadly grace. Join us. Your skills, your experience. We could own the whole state. Not interested. Then watch it burn. Every farm that helped you, every business that supported you, all of it gone. His smile turned cruel. How many children live in Thunder Valley? Accidents happen in small towns. Rebecca's voice carried a deadly quiet. Threatening children is a line you don't want to cross. Too late. Already gave the order. By sunset, Thunder Valley learns what defiance costs. Rebecca was moving before he finished speaking. Her first strike caught him off guard. Special forces against special forces, decades of training unleashed. Blood recovered quickly, his own combat experience showing. They fought with lethal precision, each recognizing the other's professional skill. Your snipers can't get an angle, Rebecca said between strikes. Ridge teams positioned themselves wrong. Blood's confidence wavered. How did... Because I chose those positions. Rebecca's counterattack drove him back. Your men have been in my crosshairs for 10 minutes. They just don't know it yet. On cue, Jake's veterans emerged from hidden positions, surrounding Blood's teams with practiced efficiency. Sarah's truck appeared. More townspeople arriving, armed and ready. See, That's the difference between us, Rebecca explained. You think strength comes from fear. I know it comes from the community. This isn't over. Blood spat blood. Actually, it is. You just don't know it yet. The raiders' military precision began to crack, their tactical advantages meaningless against an entire town using their own strategies against them. Fall back, Razor ordered. Pattern Omega-3! Omega-3? Rebecca's laugh carried real amusement. Amateur! Jake, spring the trap! The raiders' escape routes suddenly became kill zones. Years of special operations experience translated into small, town defense. Rebecca's training multiplied through every citizen who stood their ground. Mom! Emma's voice carried triumph. They're running! But Rebecca knew better. Blood was too experienced for a simple retreat. This was repositioning, preparation, for something bigger. Jack, what do you see? Her son's observation skills proved invaluable. They're not all leaving. Some are hiding equipment, big cases like the ones in our barn. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Weapon cases, military grade. Blood wasn't retreating. He was preparing for a siege. You've got 1 hour, McKenna. Blood's voice confirmed her fears. Surrender the evidence, clear the town, or I show everyone what a real special operations team can do. The sun finally set over Thunder Valley, but the real darkness was yet to come. Rebecca gathered her impromptu command team. Jake, Amy, Sarah, and Sheriff Davidson. The time for simple defense was over. Blood's right about one thing, she told them. This is war. But he forgot the most important lesson from our kind of operations. What's that? Jake asked. The deadliest predators aren't the ones making threats. Rebecca checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. They're the ones who've already chosen their killing ground, because Rebecca Winters hadn't spent 15 years in Delta Force just learning how to fight. She'd learned how to turn entire environments into weapons. Blood thought he was preparing for a siege. He didn't realize he was walking into a trap 2 decades in the making. Night fell over Thunder Valley as Rebecca transformed the town into a fortress. Every farmer's intimate knowledge of their land became a tactical advantage. Every local's understanding of backroads and hidden paths turned into strategic value. They've got military-grade equipment staged here, here, and here. Jake indicated positions on their makeshift command map. Blood's not planning a gang attack. This is a full tactical assault. That's exactly what he wants us to think. Rebecca studied the map with decades of combat experience. He's using standard Special Forces deception protocols. The real threat will come from an unexpected direction. Dr. Amy Chen burst into their command center at the diner, clutching newly discovered documents. Found something in the hospital records. Blood's team. They're not just here for territory. They're building infrastructure for something bigger. What kind of infrastructure? Military supply routes, hidden caches, training facilities disguised as abandoned properties. Amy spread out the evidence. They've been setting up a shadow network across 3 states. Sarah Cooper nodded knowingly. Just like Nicaragua in '83, create a parallel support structure using civilian cover. Everyone stared at the elderly woman, who simply smiled. Oh, you'd be amazed what a secretary learned during the Cold War, dear. Rebecca's radio crackled. Mom! Emma's voice was steady despite the tension. Jack spotted something weird. The raiders aren't just placing weapons. They're setting up relay stations, communications gear. Smart girl, Jake commented. They're building a command and control network. No. Rebecca's tactical mind saw the bigger picture. They're revealing their existing one. Jack, what else do you see? Her son's observation skills proved invaluable again. The equipment's not new, Mom. It's dusty, used, like it's been here a while. He's right, Sarah confirmed. I've been tracking unusual signal patterns for months. We're not just facing an invasion. We're exposing an operation that's been here all along. Blood's voice cut through their radios, precise and cold. Finally figuring it out, McKenna. Kabul wasn't just a mission. It was a rehearsal. For what? For proving that people like us, special operations wet work specialists, were the only ones strong enough to maintain order. These towns, these civilian sheep, they need warriors to guide them. I'm building something bigger than just a criminal. Enterprise McKenna, a network of trained operators taking control of what's rightfully ours. You mean a network of thugs terrorizing innocent people, Rebecca countered, adjusting her scope. Innocent? Blood's laugh carried dark amusement. These people are weak. They've grown soft, forgotten what real strength looks like. Just like you have, playing farmer, pretending you're not what we both know you are, a killer. That's where you're wrong. Rebecca's voice remained steady as she coordinated her defender's movements. I haven't forgotten anything, especially not Kabul. Kabul! Blood's tone shifted, revealing old wounds. You didn't just take out my team there, you destroyed everything we were building. A perfect operation, turning war into profit until you had to play hero. You were selling weapons to warlords, using special forces operations as cover for arms dealing. We were creating stability through controlled chaos. Just like here, these small towns need strong hands to guide them, and this time you won't. Stop us! Rebecca watched more raiders taking positions around town, their movements showing extensive military training, but also something else, absolute conviction in their cause. You're wrong about one thing, she responded. These aren't sheep, and I'm about to prove it. On her signal, Thunder Valley revealed its own transformation. Farmers who'd spent decades learning every inch of their land became expert guerrilla fighters. Local hunters demonstrated their own deadly skills. Even the high school shop class contributed their knowledge of machinery to tactical advantage. First wave incoming, Jake's warning carried across their network. Blood's forces launched their initial assault with military precision, expecting to find amateur resistance. Instead, they found a town-turned weapon. Rebecca had spent months preparing for this, teaching civilians to become defenders. Every street became a potential ambush, every familiar building a strategic strongpoint. They're not fighting like civilians. Razor's frustrated voice carried over intercepted communications. These are professional tactics. Because they're not just fighting for property, Rebecca replied coldly. They're fighting for home, something you forgot how to understand. The first wave of raiders fell back in disarray, their military precision useless against intimate local knowledge. But Rebecca knew this was just the beginning. Kabul taught me something important. Blood's voice carried real emotion now. That woman like you, playing soldier, would always choose the soft approach, always try to minimize casualties. You learned the wrong lesson. Rebecca's response was accompanied by precision shots that disabled key raider positions. I don't minimize casualties because I'm soft. I do it because I know exactly how many ways I can hurt you without killing. Mom! Jack's voice came through urgent but controlled. They're moving something big into position, long cases like the ones in those old war movies. Rebecca's blood ran cold. Anti-material rifles, heavy weapons. That's right, Blood confirmed. No more playing nice. You've got 1 hour to surrender the town, or I demonstrate what real special operations violence looks like. But Rebecca had planned for this too. Her months of preparation hadn't just been about defense. She'd been setting up her own operation, turning Thunder Valley into exactly the kind of trap that would snare overconfident professional soldiers. Jake, get the veterans in position. Sarah, activate your intelligence network. Amy, medical teams on standby. Rebecca checked her weapon with practiced efficiency. Emma, Jack, you know what to do. Just like you taught us, Emma confirmed. Sometimes the best defense is making them think they're the predators, Jack finished, when they're really the prey. Because Rebecca Winters hadn't spent 15 years in Delta Force just learning to fight. She'd learned how to turn overconfidence into vulnerability, how to make professional training become a weakness. Blood thought his military experience guaranteed victory. He was about to learn Why the most dangerous predators are the ones who know how to play prey until exactly the right moment to strike. Darkness enveloped the Cold War tunnels beneath Thunder Valley as Rebecca moved with practiced silence. The underground complex was exactly what she'd anticipated. A maze of reinforced corridors designed for military operations, perfect for defenders who knew its layout, deadly for overconfident attackers. "They've split into 3 teams," Jakes whispered. Report came through their secure channels, moving in standard search patterns. "Let them hunt," Rebecca replied softly. "Down here, their night vision works against them, too focused on what's directly ahead." "Mom!" Jack's voice carried urgency from his observation post above. "They're carrying something weird, like big metal briefcases." Sarah's response was immediate. "Nuclear credentials, Cold War authentication codes. Every facility like this had them." "Accessing old records now," Dr. Chen added. "Blood, Marcus Reynolds. His father was the original site commander. That's his connection to Thunder Valley." Rebecca processed this revelation while tracking raider movements through the tunnels. "He's not just after territory, he's after command protocols." "Exactly." Blood's voice cut through their communications. "Did you think I chose this town by accident, McKenna? My father built this network, created a system for real warriors to maintain control." "Your father was relieved of command," Sarah countered. "Discharged for unstable behavior and extremist views." "He was a visionary." Blood's composure cracked slightly. "He understood that civilians need to be controlled, not coddled. These access codes, these hidden facilities, they're our heritage, our right." Rebecca signaled Jake's veterans into flanking positions. The raiders were good, moving with professional precision through the darkness, but their military training made them predictable. "You really think people need warriors to control them?" Rebecca's voice echoed deliberately, drawing attention. "Look what they did when you attacked. Farmers became fighters, shopkeepers became tacticians. Playing soldier," Blood sneered. "Like your team played soldier in Kabul?" The taunt hit home. Raiders shifted positions, discipline wavering at the reminder of Blood's greatest failure. "Mom," Emma reported from above. "They're moving something big into the main entrance. Looks like breaching charges." "Good," Rebecca smiled slightly. "They're getting desperate." Underground, the battle transformed into a deadly game of cat and mouse, but Rebecca had spent months preparing these tunnels, turning them into a trap for exactly this kind of military operation. "Contact front!" Razor's voice carried panic. "They're not where they're supposed to be." "Because we're not fighting by your rule book," Rebecca replied coldly. Her first shots disabled key raiders with surgical precision, non-lethal, but devastating. "To morale, backup power failing," Jack reported. "Just like you planned, Mom." The raiders' night vision equipment suddenly became a liability, the rapid light change disorienting trained operators. Rebecca's defenders, prepared for this moment, struck with devastating efficiency. "This is impossible," Blood's voice carried. "Real fear now. These are civilian volunteers against special operations forces." "No!" Rebecca countered, eliminating another team with textbook accuracy. "These are people defending their home against men who forgot the difference between strength and cruelty." Dr. Chen's voice cut through with urgency. "Rebecca found more. Records, Blood's father. He didn't just get discharged. He tried to activate these facilities during peacetime and planned to use them for some kind of military coup." "Like father, like son," Sarah commented. "Using the same infrastructure for the same purpose." Underground, the raiders' professional formation began to crack, their military precision meaning nothing against defenders who'd memorized every corner, every shadow, every quirk of the tunnel system. "Fall back to pattern echo." Blood commanded, but his operators were already scattered, their training useless in this environment. "They're retreating toward the main chamber," Jake reported with grim satisfaction. "Their gear is impressive, but they fight like machines. No creativity, no adaptation. Dr. Chen's analysis proved crucial as the battle developed. These aren't ideologues like the raiders. They're corporate soldiers following algorithms and profit margins. That's their weakness. The turning point came when the raiders breached the town hall. Their tactical software predicted standard defensive responses, calculated optimal attack vectors. It didn't account for teenagers using parkour to outflank their positions, or farmers turning irrigation systems into area denial weapons. They're losing tactical cohesion, Jack observed. Their formations break down, like they don't know how to handle unpredictable responses. Blood himself watched his former colleagues struggle against Thunder Valley's integrated defense. They've got better training, better equipment, better everything, but they're fighting alone. Each man focused on his own role while we fight together, Rebecca confirmed, coordinating another successful counterattack. Not just as soldiers, but as a community. The raiders' command structure began to fracture as more of their tactical assumptions failed. Their neural net couldn't process defenders who didn't follow standard combat protocols, who mixed military precision with civilian improvisation. Calling in gunships, Sarah reported tensely. Private military helicopters coming in fast. But Rebecca had prepared for this too. The approaching helicopters found their targeting systems confused by precisely placed reflectors, their communications scrambled by repurposed farm equipment. Corporate leader calling for extraction, Jake reported with satisfaction. Their whole tactical models failed. Rebecca watched the raiders retreat, their perfect formation broken by simple farming tools and determined civilians. They'd brought cutting-edge military technology to eliminate resistance. Instead, they'd learned that true strength can't be calculated by computers or bought with corporate money. It comes from something more fundamental, people standing together, fighting not for profit, but for home. We've found something, Dr. Chen's voice carried urgency. These tunnels, they're not just storage, they're part of a network. Cold War, contingency sites spread across 5 states. My father's legacy. Blood's voice had lost its arrogance, replaced by something darker. A system of control points designed to maintain order when society inevitably breaks down. Each facility is stocked with weapons, supplies, authentication codes, everything needed for trained operators to assert control. To terrorize civilians, you mean? Rebecca countered, moving through the darkened corridors. Just like you're doing now. We're preparing for reality. The strong must guide the weak. My father understood that. In Kabul, we were creating a model, using military expertise to establish order through controlled chaos. These towns are just the beginning. Jack's observation skills caught something crucial. Mum, those briefcases they're carrying, they've got some kind of electronic lock, military grade. Nuclear command authentication modules, Sarah confirmed. Cold War relics. Each facility had them, meant to verify legitimate orders during a crisis, which means Blood isn't just after territory, Rebecca realized. He's trying to activate the entire network. Imagine it. Blood's voice carried a fevered conviction. Trained operators in every region, using these facilities as command points. No more soft civilian control. No more weak democratic oversight. Pure military efficiency. You mean a coup, Rebecca said coldly. Using Cold War infrastructure to establish military control of civilian areas, just like your father tried. He was right. Look how easily these towns fell to us. Civilians are sheep needing guidance. In Kabul, you were selling weapons to warlords, using special forces operations as cover for arms dealing. Just like here, using the Crimson Riders to hide your real operation. Through her tactical scope, Rebecca spotted Blood's position. In the main control room, he was working on something, the authentication module connected to old computer systems. Mom? Emma's voice carried a warning. Power signatures are spiking in the tunnel system. Whatever they're doing, it's drawing massive electricity. He's trying to bring the network online, Sarah realized. If he succeeds, it'll activate similar facilities across 5 states, give his operators control of key infrastructure, communications, supply routes, everything needed for military control of civilian areas, Rebecca finished, just like his father planned. The tunnels hummed with increasing power as ancient systems awakened. Blood's remaining operators took defensive positions around the control room, protecting their leader as he worked. "You can't stop this, McKenna," Blood called out. "These codes, these facilities, they're our heritage. What we were trained for. That's where you're wrong." Rebecca's voice carried absolute conviction. "We weren't trained to control civilians. We were trained to protect them." Through her scope, she watched Blood's fingers flying over old keyboards, entering authentication sequences. His remaining men maintained perfect tactical positions, their training evident in every movement. Perfect, predictable, vulnerable. "Remember what I taught you both," Rebecca spoke softly to her children. "Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one they never see coming." Emma and Jack finished together. Because Rebecca Winters hadn't spent 15 years in Delta Force just learning tactics. She'd learned that the deadliest weapon isn't always a gun. Sometimes it's knowing exactly how your enemy thinks and using that knowledge to make their greatest strength become their fatal weakness. "Remember what you taught us, Mom." Emma's voice carried pride. "Sometimes the best defense isn't high technology. It's knowing exactly what you're protecting," Jack finished, directing another successful ambush. The Raiders' final push demonstrated their fatal flaw: perfect soldiers fighting with perfect precision, unable to adapt when their tactical software encountered human unpredictability. Thunder Valley's defenders didn't just repel them. They systematically dismantled their entire operational doctrine, showing that all the military technology in the world means nothing against people fighting with both skill and heart. Rebecca's voice cut through the darkness of the command center. "You've got 1 minute to shut down the activation sequence, Blood. After that, things get complicated." "You don't understand what's really at stake here." Blood's fingers continued moving across the ancient keyboards. "These facilities, this, network, it's not just about control, it's about preparation." Preparation for what? The inevitable collapse. When civilian authority fails, when democracy proves too weak to maintain order. My father saw it coming, built this network to ensure trained operators could take control when needed. Through her scope, Rebecca watched the authentication modules, powering up, their status lights shifting from red to amber. Old computer systems hummed to life, decades-old machinery awakening. "Mom," Jack's voice carried urgency. "More power signatures activating, not just here, getting readings from multiple locations across the state." "The network's coming online," Sarah confirmed. "Similar facilities are powering up: Millbrook, Pine Ridge, Cedar Valley, all showing activity." "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Blood's voice carried almost religious fervor. Decades of planning finally activated, a parallel command structure hidden in plain sight, ready to take control when civilian authority crumbles. "More like ready to cause that collapse," Rebecca countered, "creating chaos to justify military control, just like you tried in Kabul." "Kabul was a test run." Blood's composure cracked slightly. "Using military operations to establish controlled disorder, proving that only trained operators could restore stability. These towns are the next phase." Rebecca moved silently through the shadows, positioning herself for what would come next. "And the Crimson Riders, just cover for recruiting more operators? Former special forces mercenaries, private military contractors, men who understand that strength is the only true law. The bikers are just camouflage, making civilians think they're facing simple criminals instead of trained military assets." "Authentication sequence at 60%, Dr. Chen reported tensely. "If he completes activation—" "He won't," Rebecca assured her. Because he's forgotten the most important lesson from our kind of operations. And what's that? Blood's hands flew across the keyboards, entering final sequences. Sometimes the deadliest threat isn't the one you're watching for. Rebecca's voice carried cold certainty. Emma, Jack, execute pattern Delta. Above ground, her children's months of preparation proved their worth. Emma's team cut specific power lines in precise sequence, while Jack's observers reported enemy positions with practiced efficiency. Power fluctuations detected, Sarah announced. Authentication. Systems showing instability. Impossible. Blood's fingers moved faster. These systems have independent power, hardened against interference. True, Rebecca agreed. But their cooling systems rely on civilian infrastructure. Amazing what a few well-placed changes to municipal water pressure can do. The ancient computers began showing warning signs, their temperature readings climbing as carefully modified coolant flows were diverted. Doesn't matter, Blood snarled. Authentication at 80%. Once the network activates, our operators take control of key infrastructure, power, communications, transportation, everything needed to establish military authority. You're assuming your operators are still in position. Rebecca's smile carried in her voice. Jake? All tactical teams reporting success, the veteran mechanic confirmed. While you were focused on the command center, we've been systematically isolating your forces. Those outposts you established under new management. Blood's tactical display showed communications failing across his network as prepared positions were neutralized one by one. His perfect military operation was unraveling in ways no training manual covered. This is impossible. He slammed his fists on the ancient console. These are civilian volunteers against trained operators. No, Rebecca corrected. These are people defending their homes against men who forgot the difference between protection and control. Emma? Ready, Mom. Jack's observers confirm all positions. Execute. Across Thunder Valley, carefully prepared defenses activated. Not military weapons or tactical systems, but the tools of civilian life turned against those who'd forgotten their purpose. Irrigation systems became area denial weapons. Farm equipment blocked crucial access routes. Local knowledge trumped military doctrine. Authentication failing, Sarah reported with satisfaction. Systems overheating, security protocols activating. No! Blood's desperation showed in his voice. My father's vision, the network, we were supposed to save society from its own weakness. By destroying it? Rebecca's voice carried genuine pity. By turning trained protectors into oppressors. That's not strength, Marcus. That's just another kind of weakness. The command center's ancient systems began shutting down as thermal failsafes activated. Decades of hidden preparation rendered useless by civilian ingenuity and a mother's determination to protect her children's future. It's over, Rebecca announced. Your network's dead. Your operators are contained. Time to surrender. Blood's laughter carried genuine madness. You think this ends here? There are other facilities, other operators. My father's vision won't die. Actually, it will. Sarah's voice carried grim satisfaction. While you were focused on activation, I've been transmitting the network's locations to federal authorities. Every facility, every cache, every hidden outpost, all exposed. Impossible. These systems are encrypted, hardened against interference. True, the elderly woman agreed. But your father's codes haven't changed since 1983. Amazing what an intelligence officer posing as a secretary can learn, given enough time. Blood's remaining men began retreating, their tactical precision breaking down as they realized the full scope of their failure. But their leader remained at the controls, desperately trying to salvage his operation. Last chance, Rebecca warned. Surrender now, or I demonstrate why I had the highest confirmed kills in Delta Force history. You don't understand. Blood's voice carried genuine despair. Without the network, without control, society will collapse. Civilians can't maintain order. They need guidance, need warriors to know. Rebecca's interruption carried absolute certainty. What they need is people willing to protect instead of control, to serve instead of dominate. That's what we were trained for, Marcus. That's what you forgot. Through her scope, she watched Blood's shoulders slump as the truth finally hit home. His father's vision, his lifetime of preparation, his belief in military control, all undone by the very civilians he'd dismissed as weak. Your father was wrong, Rebecca said softly. True strength doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from teaching them to be strong themselves. The command center's lights flickered and died as the last systems failed. In the darkness, Blood finally spoke the words that ended his father's decades-old dream. I surrender. Because Rebecca Winters hadn't spent 15 years in Delta Force just learning how to fight. She'd learned that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in defeating your enemy. It's in showing them why they became an enemy in the first place. The morning sun rose over Thunder Valley, painting the aftermath of battle in shades of gold. Rebecca supervised as federal agents secured the underground facility, cataloging decades of hidden preparation. Blood sat quietly in custody, watching. As his father's dream of military control crumbled, found more records, Sarah reported, spreading documents across the makeshift command center. Similar facilities in 12 states, all part of a contingency network designed to establish military authority over civilian areas. How many are activated? Rebecca asked, studying the maps. None, Dr. Chen confirmed. Blood's authentication attempt was the first. But we're finding more operators in position. Former special forces, mercenaries, private military contractors. All waiting for activation orders. Jake emerged from the tunnels, his expression grim. Weapons caches, communications gear, tactical equipment, enough to outfit a small army. They weren't just planning to control these towns. They were preparing for a full military occupation. Using civilian unrest as justification, Rebecca concluded. Create chaos through groups like the Crimson Riders, then offer military solutions through trained operators. Perfect cover for a coup. Mom! Emma's voice carried urgency as she ran into the command center. Jack's observers spotted something. More riders approaching, but different. These ones have government plates under their civilian covers. Rebecca checked her tactical display. More operators? Better, Sarah smiled. Remember those transmissions I sent? Seems some people in Washington still monitor Cold War frequencies. Joint Task Force incoming. FBI, military intelligence, Special Operations Command. Blood's network didn't just threaten these towns, it threatened national security. Through the command center windows, Rebecca watched black SUVs and unmarked vehicles rolling into Thunder Valley. Elite operators deployed with practiced precision, but these ones wore federal badges instead of motorcycle patches. Agent Sarah Cooper, a tall man in a tactical suit, approached, showing credentials. Or should I say Colonel, 15 years deep cover, monitoring Cold War contingency sites. Impressive work. Sarah's smile carried decades of hidden experience. Someone had to watch the watchmen, James, especially after commanders like Blood's father started going rogue. Speaking of watching, Jack's voice crackled through their tactical net. Those new operators entering the tunnels, they're moving wrong, not a federal pattern. Rebecca's combat instinct snapped to alert. Blood's backup plan, how many? 3 teams, her son reported, moving like private military contractors, high-end gear, professional formation. They're after the authentication codes, Blood spoke for the first time since his surrender. More operators, still believing in the dream. They'll take the codes, activate other facilities. You can't stop all of them. Watch us, Emma replied coldly. She'd learned more than just tactical observation from her mother. She'd learned the steel that lay behind it. All defenders execute pattern echo, Rebecca commanded. Across Thunder. Valley, her months of preparation proved their worth again. Civilian volunteers moved with practice coordination, supplementing federal forces. Local knowledge combined with professional tactical support. The private military contractors found themselves caught between trained federal operators and determined civilian defenders. Their perfect tactical approach meant nothing against people fighting to protect their homes. The West team neutralized, Jake reported. These contractors are good, but they fight like machines. No adaptation, no creativity. East Sector Security, Dr. Chen added. 2 contractors in custody, 1 requiring medical attention. Tried breaching the hospital, found out why you don't threaten doctors who served in combat zones. Blood watched. His last hope of salvaging his father's vision dissolve. You've turned them all into fighters, he said quietly. Civilians, farmers, doctors, all playing soldier. No, Rebecca corrected. We've reminded them they were always strong. Just not in the way you understand strength. The Federal Task Force commander approached as the last contractors were secured. Director wants to talk to you, McKenna, off the record, about expanding this program. What you've built here, civilian defense integration, community-based security, it's exactly what we need to counter threats like Blood's network. Interested in a consulting position? Rebecca watched her children helping federal agents catalog seized equipment, their movements showing the perfect blend of civilian creativity and tactical precision she'd taught them. Thanks, she replied, but I've got a farm to run, although, yes, those other towns Blood's operators were targeting. They could use some training, community-based, civilian-led, teaching them to protect themselves instead of relying on others for protection. The commander nodded thoughtfully. We could arrange that. Unofficial capacity, of course. Keep your cover as a simple farmer. Speaking of farming, Emma interrupted, those fields aren't going to tend themselves, Mom, and Atlas has been alerting us to something in the south pasture. Rebecca smiled. After all the tactical operations, all the hidden preparations and military precision, her daughter still remembered their core truth. They were farmers first, protectors second. Duty calls, she told the commander. Send me the details about those other towns. But right now, I've got fence posts to check. Blood watched her walking away, genuine confusion in his expression. I don't understand. You could have power, authority, and a chance to shape national security policy. Instead, you choose to farm? That's why you failed, Rebecca replied simply. You never understood that real strength isn't about having power over others. It's about having the power to choose what truly matters. She left the federal agents to their work, walking the familiar path back to her fields. Emma and Jack fell into step beside her while Atlas ranged ahead, checking their perimeter with professional efficiency. They'll try again, her daughter said quietly. Other operators, other networks, men like Blood, who think strength means control. Let them try. Rebecca checked her fence line with practiced precision, the same careful attention she'd once given to weapons maintenance. We'll be ready. And this time, Jack added, his observation skills catching a broken post before she did. We won't be standing alone. Because Rebecca Winters hadn't spent 15 years in Delta Force just learning combat skills. She'd learned that true security doesn't come from controlling others through force or fear. It comes from teaching them to stand strong together, to protect what matters most, not through military might or tactical precision, but through the simple, unshakable strength of people defending their homes, their families, their way of life. The morning sun climbed higher as they worked. Mother and children tending their land with the same careful attention they'd given to defending it. Behind them, federal agents secured Blood's network, dismantling decades of hidden preparation for military control. But the real victory wasn't in defeating one hidden threat. It was in showing that true strength grows from the ground up, nurtured by communities standing together, teaching each other that the most powerful defense isn't in weapons or tactics. It's in remembering that some things are worth protecting, worth fighting for, not through force or fear, but through the quiet, determined strength of people who know exactly what they're defending and exactly how far they'll go to defend it. 1 month after Blood's capture, Rebecca found the first signs that his network hadn't died with his surrender. 3 black SUVs parked outside Henderson's general store, their civilian plates masking military-grade modifications. The men inside moved with the distinctive precision of private military contractors. "They've been asking questions," Margaret reported quietly as Rebecca examined seed catalogues. About the battle, about how civilians managed to defeat trained operators, said they were from an independent security consulting firm. Which firm? Rebecca's casual stance masked, heightened. Alert, Aegis Tactical Solutions, never heard of them. You wouldn't, Sarah joined them, her intelligence background evident in her careful positioning. They're a front for former special operations commanders, men who share Blood's philosophy about military control of civilian populations. Atlas's low growl warned of approaching danger. 2 of the contractors entered, moving with practiced coordination that screamed professional training. "Mrs. Winters?" The leader smiled without warmth. "John Marshall, Aegis Tactical. Interested in discussing your community defense program. Our clients are very impressed with your methods." "Not interested in consulting work," Rebecca replied calmly. "Too busy farming? This wouldn't be consulting." Marshall's smile remained. "Fixed. Full acquisition. Your techniques, your training programs, properly monetized, they could be worth millions. Better than struggling with bank payments on a failing farm." Rebecca noted his subtle emphasis on her financial situation, the implied threat behind the offer. "Thank you, but no. Some opportunities only come once, Mrs. Winters. Smart people know when to take advantage of changing circumstances." The bell chimed as Emma entered, her movements showing the same controlled awareness Rebecca had taught her. "Mum!" Jack spotted 3 more vehicles on the ridge, military hardware under civilian cover. Marshall's expression shifted slightly, professional assessment recognizing trained observation. Impressive situational awareness for a teenager. "Your children have learned well." The threat beneath his words was clear. Rebecca met his gaze coldly. "They've learned what matters, like knowing when someone's trying to threaten their family." "No threats." Marshall raised his hands in mock surrender, "just pointing out that skills like yours are valuable, especially now, with more organizations interested in civilian control methodology." "You mean more people trying to do what Blood failed at," Sarah commented, "using private military contractors to establish control over civilian populations." "The world's changing, ladies. Communities need protection, structure, guidance from those trained to maintain order." "Sounds familiar," Jake's voice carried from the doorway. The veteran mechanic moved with combat-trained precision, despite his prosthetic leg. "Blood said similar things. Before we showed him civilians don't need military control to be strong." Marshall's team shifted positions subtly, professional operators recognizing potential threats. Blood was a zealot, pursuing his father's outdated vision. "We represent something more pragmatic, corporate efficiency combined with military expertise." "Meaning, you want to privatize what Blood tried to take by force," Rebecca concluded. "Turn community defense into a corporate product. We prefer to call it professional security integration. Our clients understand that civilian populations need structure, properly trained operators providing protection, maintaining order." "You mean control," Emma interrupted, her mother's steel in her young voice, "just like Blood wanted." Marshall's facade cracked slightly. "You really think civilians can maintain security without professional guidance? Blood's network may be finished, but there are others. Organizations with corporate backing, political connections, smart communities know when to accept protection. Like those 3 towns in Idaho accepted protection, Sarah asked innocently, before their local governments were replaced by private. Security contractors, their police forces are supplemented by corporate operators. The temperature in the store seemed to drop as Marshall's professional mask slipped further. You've been investigating us. Actually, Rebecca smiled slightly, we've been expecting you. Blood wasn't subtle about his corporate connections, or the private military companies waiting to step in if his operation failed. Through the window, she noted more vehicles arriving, but these carried the distinctive signatures of federal task force operators. Sarah's intelligence network had been busy. Last chance, Mrs. Winters. Marshall's voice carried deadly promise. Corporate acquisition is cleaner than other methods, but one way or another your defensive techniques will be monetized. Professional. Operators will restore proper order to civilian populations. Interesting choice of words, Jake commented. Restore order. Same thing Blood said, before his perfect military operation got dismantled by farmers and shopkeepers. Marshall's team was already moving, responding to the approaching federal vehicles. Think about your children's future, Mrs. Winters. Corporate protection means security, stability. The alternative is watching more private military contractors learn the same lesson Blood did, Rebecca finished. That real strength doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from teaching them to protect themselves. The contractors departed with professional efficiency, but Rebecca knew this wasn't over. Blood's network of hidden bunkers and true believer operators had been just one threat. Now they faced something potentially more dangerous. Corporate mercenaries trying to privatize civilian control. They'll be back, Emma said quietly as the SUVs disappeared toward the ridge. With more resources, more operators. Let them come. Rebecca checked her fence line with practiced precision. We'll be ready. And this time, Jack's voice carried from his observation post, we know exactly what we're fighting. Because Rebecca Winters hadn't spent 15 years in Delta Force just learning combat tactics, she'd learned to recognize the different faces of control, whether they wore military patches or corporate logos. The afternoon sun painted Thunder Valley in shades of amber as Rebecca gathered her impromptu command team. Sarah's intelligence indicated more private military companies moving into position, establishing security contracts with vulnerable communities. They're smarter than Blood, Jake analyzed the tactical data, using corporate infrastructure instead of military force. Legal contracts instead of direct threats. Same goal though, Dr. Chen added. Control civilian populations through professional operators, just with better marketing. Rebecca studied the map showing affected communities. How many companies are involved? At least 5 major players, Sarah reported, all staffed by former special operations, private military contractors, all sharing Blood's philosophy about civilian control, just with corporate efficiency. And better equipment, Emma noted, reviewing surveillance photos. Latest tactical gear, military-grade weapons registered to private security firms. Legal. On paper, lethal in practice. The pieces of a larger pattern emerged. Blood's network of true believer operators had been dangerous but limited. These corporate mercenaries had virtually unlimited resources, political connections, and the perfect cover of legitimate business. They're already moving on Cedar Ridge, Jack reported from his observation post. 3 private security firms offering protection after a suspicious wave of vandalism. Same pattern as Pine Valley, Jake confirmed. Create problems then. Sell solutions. Corporate version of Blood's strategy. Rebecca's tactical mind processed the emerging threat. Blood had tried using military force to control civilian populations. These corporate contractors were using boardroom tactics to achieve the same goal. They think buying our methods will give them what Blood couldn't take by force, she said finally. The ability to control communities through professional protection. What they don't understand, Emma added with quiet certainty, is that real protection can't be bought or sold. It has to be earned, Jack finished. Through trust, not control, because the greatest threat to Thunder Valley wasn't just men with guns anymore. It was men in suits trying to turn community defense into a corporate product, trying to package and sell what could only be built through shared struggle and common purpose. The battle for Thunder Valley was about to enter a new phase, one where the enemies wouldn't just be zealot operators following a madman's vision, but corporate mercenaries with unlimited resources and a profit motive for control. Rebecca checked her hidden rifle with practiced efficiency, remembering all the reasons she'd chosen this quiet life. Blood had tried to destroy that life through military force. Now others would try to buy it through corporate power. They would learn the same lesson. Some things can't be taken by force or purchased with money. Some things have to be earned through trust, defended through commitment, protected by people who understand that real strength comes from standing together, not as soldiers or contractors, but as neighbors, as a community, as a family. The sun set over Thunder Valley as Rebecca prepared for what would come next, because the hardest battles aren't always fought with guns and tactics. Sometimes they're fought with something stronger, the unshakable conviction that true security can't be bought, sold, or controlled. It can only be built day by people who know exactly what they're protecting and exactly how far they'll go to protect it. The next morning brought new intelligence from Sarah's network. 3 more private military companies had established regional offices near vulnerable communities. Their paperwork was perfect, their business licenses legitimate, their corporate structures impeccable. Found something interesting, Dr. Chen reported, spreading financial records across the command center. These companies, they're all subsidiaries of larger defense contractors. The same contractors that supplied Blood's network. They're evolving, Jake analyzed. Using corporate infrastructure to continue what Blood started. Instead of military force, they're using business contracts. Aegis Tactical isn't just here for our methods, Sarah added. They're assessing every community that resisted Blood's operators, planning corporate takeovers disguised as security services. Rebecca studied surveillance photos showing more private military contractors moving into position. Their tactical gear carried corporate logos instead of military patches, but their movements showed the same dedication to control. "Mom," Jack's voice crackled through their communications. "Those contractors that visited yesterday, they're back, but a different approach this time." Through her tactical scope, Rebecca watched 3 black SUVs approach Thunder Valley's main street. The men who emerged wore expensive suits instead of tactical gear, carried briefcases instead of weapons. Corporate acquisition team, Sarah identified. Former CIA operations specialists, now working in the private sector. They specialize in persuading communities to accept corporate protection. Marshall led the team, his professional smile unchanged. But Rebecca noted the subtle threats beneath his corporate demeanor, the way his men positioned themselves, the careful assessment of tactical advantages. "Mrs. Winters," he approached the diner where she sat with Emma, "you've had time to consider our offer. My superiors have authorized significant compensation for your defensive methodology. Still not interested?" "You should be." Marshall's smile didn't waver. "We've acquired controlling interest in 3 regional banks, including the one holding your mortgage. Foreclosure can be unfortunate, especially for single mothers." Emma's hand tightened on her coffee cup, but her voice remained steady. "You're threatening our farm?" "Not threatening. Simply pointing out economic realities. Communities need structure, professional protection. One way or another, privatized security is inevitable." "Like in Cedar Ridge?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Where did your corporate protection replaced? Local law enforcement? Or Pine Valley, where private contractors now control access to public roads?" Marshall's facade cracked slightly. You've been investigating our operations. Actually, Sarah joined them, her intelligence background evident in her careful positioning. We've been documenting them. Every contract, every accident that created need for corporate security, every illegal operation hidden behind legitimate business. Interesting files, Jake added from his position by the door, especially the ones showing connections between private military companies and Blood's network. The federal task force found them very interesting too. Marshall's team shifted positions, corporate professionals recognizing tactical disadvantages. Think carefully about your next move, Mrs. Winters. Corporate acquisition is still preferable to other methods. You mean like the accidents your operators arrange? Rebecca's voice carried deadly certainty. The staged incidents that convince communities they need private security. We're not blood zealots, Marshall countered. We're businessmen, offering professional services. Communities need protection, structure, guidance from trained operators. No, Rebecca corrected. Communities need to remember their own strength, need to stand together against anyone trying to control them, whether through force or finance. That's not how the world works anymore. Marshall's corporate mask slipped further. Civilian populations require professional management, if not through military force, then through corporate efficiency. That's where you're wrong. Rebecca's smile carried no warmth. The world works exactly how communities decide it works. Blood tried to take control through military force. You're trying to buy it through corporate power. Both approaches ignore one simple truth. And what's that? Real strength can't be taken by force or purchased with money. It has to be earned. Through trust, defended through commitment, protected by people who understand that true security comes from standing together. Marshall studied her with a cold professional assessment. Admirable philosophy, impractical in today's world. Corporate control is inevitable. The only question is whether communities accept it willingly or require persuasion. Like the persuasion your operators used in Millbrook, Emma asked innocently. Before the federal investigation into corporate conspiracy and illegal paramilitary operations, the temperature in the diner seemed to drop as Marshall's team recognized the trap. Their perfect corporate cover was already compromised, their illegal operations exposed. 3 days after Marshall's visit, Thunder Valley faced its first corporate assault. It came not with guns or threats, but through paperwork and legal maneuvers. They're freezing accounts, Sarah reported from her intelligence center. Not just yours. Everyone who helped defend against Blood's operators, bank irregularities requiring extended holds. Power companies next, Jake added. Corporate takeover through shell companies. They'll control the infrastructure within a week. Rebecca studied tactical data showing more private military contractors moving into position, not attacking openly like Blood's forces, but establishing presence through legitimate business fronts. Mum, Emma's voice carried urgency. Jack spotted something at the school board meeting. Corporate representatives offering private security services after those mysterious break-ins last week. Break-ins their operators arranged, Rebecca concluded, creating problems to sell solutions. Dr. Chen arrived with fresh intelligence. It's worse. Found their playbook, standard corporate takeover strategy. First, isolate target communities through financial pressure. Then create security concerns requiring private contractor response. Finally, establish permanent corporate presence through emergency management contracts. They're smarter than Blood, Jake observed. No direct violence, no obvious threats. Everything is perfectly legal on paper. But the end goal's the same, Rebecca replied. Control civilian populations through professional operators, just with a corporate efficiency instead of military force. Thunder Valley's defenders faced a new kind of battle. not against armed raiders, but against corporate mercenaries using business tactics as weapons. They're moving on the county commissioners, Sarah reported, offering infrastructure development contracts with private security requirements. 3 commissioners already compromised. Local businesses are next, Jake added. Selective pressure. Through loan recalls, license reviews, forcing them to accept corporate protection or face financial ruin. Rebecca watched more corporate security teams establishing positions around town. Their tactical gear carried company logos instead of military patches, but their movements showed the same dedication to control. 2 more private military companies set up offices in Cedar Ridge, Emma reported from her observation post. Aegis, tactical subsidiaries, they're surrounding us. Not just us, Sarah confirmed. Every community that resisted Blood's operators, corporate takeover instead of military force. The first direct confrontation came at Henderson's general store. Corporate. Security teams arrived to conduct a routine safety inspection. Their weapons were legal, their paperwork perfect, their threats wrapped in professional courtesy. This location requires significant security upgrades, their team leader informed Margaret. Fortunately, Aegis Tactical offers comprehensive protection packages, unless you prefer dealing with regulatory violations. Those regulations wouldn't happen to be from agencies recently privatized through corporate contracts? Rebecca asked from the doorway. Her stance was casual, but her positioning was pure Delta force. The security team shifted uneasily, professional operators recognizing trained opposition. Simply offering business services, Mrs. Winters. Communities need protection in today's world, like the protection your operators provided in Millbrook. Before the federal investigation into corporate conspiracy, the team leader's corporate mask slipped slightly. Careful, Mrs. Winters. Some business decisions can have unfortunate consequences. So I've noticed. Rebecca's smile carried no warmth. Like the consequences your operators faced in Cedar Ridge when they pushed too hard. Amazing how many private security contractors needed medical evacuation. The threat hung in the air, professional operators recognizing the steel behind. Her words. They departed with corporate efficiency, but Rebecca knew this was just the beginning. They'll try something bigger, Jake warned as they watched the security teams retreat. Corporate takeovers require total control. They can't risk other communities. Seeing successful resistance, let them try. Rebecca checked her tactical positions with practiced precision. Blood thought military force guaranteed victory. These corporate mercenaries think money and legal power make them unstoppable. They're about to learn differently, Emma added, her mother's determination evident in her voice, because the battle for Thunder Valley had evolved. No longer just defending against armed raiders, they faced corporate predators trying to turn community defense into a profitable product. More contractors moving into position, Jack reported through their tactical net. Different companies, same training, all ex-military, all sharing Blood's philosophy about civilian control. But with better funding, Sarah added. Private military companies backed by defense contractors, unlimited resources, political connections, perfect corporate cover. Rebecca watched more security teams establishing presence around town. Their methods were subtle, their approach professional, their control disguised as protection, but the intent was the same as Blood's operators: dominate civilian populations through trained force. They think corporate power makes them invincible, she told her gathered defenders. Time to show them that some things can't be bought or controlled. Thunder Valley's response began not with guns or tactics, but with the same quiet strength that had defeated Blood's military force. Local businesses supporting each other against corporate pressure, neighbors standing together against private security intimidation, community bonds proving stronger than corporate power. 3 security teams pulled out of Cedar Ridge, Emma reported with satisfaction. Seems their operators had trouble dealing with uncooperative civilians. Millbrook's next, Jake added. Corporate protection isn't profitable when communities refuse to be controlled, because Rebecca Winters hadn't just taught her people tactical defense. She taught them that true strength comes not from weapons or money, but from standing together against anyone trying to dominate through force or finance. The corporate mercenaries would learn what Blood's operators had discovered. Some things can't be taken by violence or purchased with wealth. They have to be earned through trust, defended through commitment, protected by people who understand that real security comes from unity, not control. Thunder Valley faced its greatest challenge yet, not just defending against armed threats, but resisting the subtle power of corporate domination. The battle would require different weapons, different tactics, and different strength. But the truth remained the same. True protection can't be bought or sold. It grows from communities standing together, teaching each other that the most powerful defense isn't found in guns or money. It's found in people who know exactly what they're protecting and exactly how far they'll go to protect it. Rebecca and her defenders knew the battle ahead was unlike anything they had faced. Corporate power didn't march down Main Street with banners and rifles. It seeped in through contracts, lobbyists, and shell corporations. It was subtle, pervasive, and designed to make resistance seem futile. But Thunder Valley wasn't just any community. They had already proven that when Blood's forces came. And now they will do it again. The first step was intelligence. Sarah worked tirelessly in her makeshift command center, combing through corporate filings, financial transfers, and local government records. Her efforts unearthed a complex web of connections. Aegis Tactical wasn't just an independent security contractor. It was part of a sprawling conglomerate with ties to defense manufacturing, lobbying groups, and even media outlets. They're not just after Thunder Valley, Sarah explained during a late-night briefing. They're targeting key communities across the region. Isolate, destabilize, privatize. This isn't just a power grab, it's an experiment. If they succeed here, they'll replicate it nationwide. Rebecca leaned over the table, studying a map dotted with pins and notes. Then we make sure they fail here. The next morning, Thunder Valley launched its counteroffensive. Not with weapons, but with solidarity. Farmers pooled their resources to create a local food co-op, bypassing corporate distributors. The town's only gas station switched to community-based fuel procurement, cutting ties with major suppliers. A local credit union reopened under a new charter, ensuring residents could access their savings despite corporate interference. At the same time, Rebecca and her team began dismantling the corporate presence piece by piece. Jake and Emma led a covert operation to plant tracking devices on the corporate SUVs, feeding their movements into Sarah's database. Patterns emerged, revealing supply lines, staging areas, and communication hubs. Every operation has a weakness, Sarah said, marking a spot on the map. Here's theirs, overextension. They've deployed too many resources too quickly. If we can disrupt their logistics, we'll force them to pull back. The next confrontation came at the county courthouse. Aegis Tactical representatives had arrived to finalize a contract granting them exclusive rights to manage local infrastructure, including the power grid and water supply. Rebecca, flanked by local leaders, walked into the meeting with evidence of the company's illegal activities. "This isn't a negotiation," Rebecca stated, slamming a folder of documents onto the table. "This is a cease and desist order. We've already sent copies to the State Attorney General's office, the Federal Trade Commission, and every investigative journalist within 500 miles. The corporate lawyers smirked, their confidence unshaken. "Do you think this changes anything? We have contracts, resources, and the best legal team money can buy." "And we have the people," Emma countered, stepping forward. "You can't run a power grid without technicians. You can't enforce security without local support. You can't dominate a community that refuses to play your game. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of townsfolk had gathered, holding signs and chanting slogans. The corporate representatives watched uneasily as the protests swelled, their polished arguments drowned out by the voices of a united community. In the weeks that followed, the tide began to turn. The federal investigation into Aegis Tactical gained traction, fueled by Sarah's documentation. Whistleblowers from within the company came forward, emboldened by the community's resistance. Media outlets picked up the story, exposing the corporation's unethical practices to a national audience. Thunder Valley became a symbol of defiance, inspiring other communities to resist similar takeovers. Local governments across the region began reviewing and in some cases cancelling contracts with Aegis Tactical and its affiliates. But the fight wasn't over. The corporation's resources were vast and their operatives were relentless. Rebecca knew they would adapt, finding new ways to exert control. Yet she also knew that Thunder Valley had something the corporations couldn't replicate, a community bound by trust, strengthened by adversity, and willing to fight for their freedom. One evening, as the sun set over Thunder Valley, Rebecca stood on the hill overlooking the town. Emma joined her, a quiet strength in her eyes. "They'll come back," Emma said. "Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but they'll come." Rebecca nodded, her expression resolute. "Then we'll be ready." Because Thunder Valley wasn't just a place, it was a promise, a reminder that real strength comes from standing together, that true security is built on trust, and that no amount of money or power can control a community that refuses to surrender its soul. The nights in Thunder Valley carried a new kind of tension. It wasn't the terror of an ambush or a raid, but the quiet dread of unseen forces. Rebecca knew the corporations weren't finished. They would regroup, refine their tactics, and come back stronger. But for now, the town had a rare moment too. "Breathe. We need allies," Sarah said one afternoon, poring over a map marked with pins. "Other communities are facing the same pressure we are. If we stand together, we can coordinate a defense." Rebecca agreed. Thunder Valley couldn't stand alone forever. They needed to expand their network of resistance. Jake and Emma took on the task of reaching out to neighboring towns. Armed with evidence of Aegis Tactical's illegal operations and stories of Thunder Valley's resilience, they met with local leaders, farmers, and small business owners. Their efforts bore fruit. Cedar Ridge, Millbrook, and Pine Valley joined forces with Thunder Valley, forming a coalition of independent communities. They shared intelligence, pooled resources, and established a communication network to warn each other of corporate activity. "When they come for one of us," Rebecca declared during the coalition's first meeting, "they'll find all of us standing in their way." It didn't take long for the corporations to retaliate. They launched a coordinated campaign targeting Cedar Ridge, using their usual tactics: financial pressure, legal maneuvers, and subtle intimidation. But this time, the community was ready. Sarah's intelligence network identified the corporation's logistical hub, a regional office in a nearby city. It wasn't heavily guarded, relying instead on legal protections and anonymity. Rebecca saw an opportunity. Using information provided by whistleblowers, the coalition organized a precision operation to expose the corporation's activities. Jake, Emma, and a team of trusted volunteers infiltrated the office, gathering critical documents and recordings. The operation was swift and efficient, and within days, the evidence was leaked to the press. The fallout was immediate. Headlines blared with stories of corruption, fraud, and illegal surveillance. The public outcry forced the corporation to pull out of Cedar Ridge entirely. "This is how we fight them," Rebecca said after the victory. "Not just with force, but with the truth. We show the world what they're doing, and we make it impossible for them to operate in the shadows." The success of the coalition didn't go unnoticed. Aegis Tactical doubled down, deploying new teams with more aggressive strategies. They began targeting coalition leaders with personal attacks, slander campaigns, legal harassment, and even subtle threats to their families. Rebecca became a prime target. One morning she found her farm vandalized, the barn doors spray-painted, with ominous warnings. The message was clear: back down or face the consequences. "Let them come," Rebecca said, her voice steady. "They think fear will break us, but fear only makes us stronger." The coalition rallied around her, sending volunteers to repair the damage and fortify the farm. For every act of intimidation, the communities responded with acts of unity. It became a battle of attrition, corporate wealth versus human determination. Realizing they couldn't match the corporation's resources directly, the coalition began employing unconventional tactics. Farmers used their knowledge of the land to create logistical roadblocks, making it difficult for corporate convoys to move supplies. Hackers within the coalition targeted corporate servers, exposing shady deals and sabotaging operations. Local governments passed ordinances limiting corporate influence, backed by overwhelming public support. Even the children of Thunder Valley joined the fight. Emma organized a group of students to document corporate activity on their phones, flooding social media with videos of intimidation tactics. The hashtag #ThatcherStandWithThunderValley began trending, drawing national attention to their struggle. "What we're doing here," Rebecca told Emma one evening, "isn't just about Thunder Valley. It's about showing people everywhere that they can fight back, that they don't have to give in." The tipping point came when Aegis Tactical launched its most brazen move yet, a direct attempt to seize control of Thunder Valley's infrastructure. Contractors armed with court orders and backed by private security teams marched into town, demanding immediate access to the power plant and water system. Rebecca and her team were waiting. The entire community turned out, blocking the roads with tractors, trucks, and bodies. The contractors faced not an armed militia, but a sea of defiant civilians armed with nothing but their determination. Marshall, the corporate representative, stood at the front, his professional mask back in place. "This is a legal operation," he announced, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "Interfering will result in severe consequences." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "You think a piece of paper gives you the right to take what doesn't belong to you? You think we'll stand by and let you destroy our lives?" "This isn't your choice, Mrs. Winters," Marshall replied. "It's inevitable." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "What's inevitable is this: we're not going anywhere. You can bring your court orders, your lawyers, your security teams. We'll still be here. Together." The crowd erupted into cheers, their unity an unbreakable shield. Marshall hesitated, his calculated demeanor faltering. He had expected resistance, but not this, a community so united that no amount of corporate power could shake them. After hours of standoff, the contractors retreated, their mission a failure. It was a victory not just for Thunder Valley, but for every community watching their struggle. The retreat marked a turning point. Public opinion had fully turned against Aegis Tactical, and government investigations intensified. Within months, the corporation's operations in the region were dismantled. Laws were passed to limit the influence of private military companies, and Thunder Valley became a symbol of grassroots resistance. Rebecca stood on her porch one evening, watching the sunset. Emma joined her, a quiet pride in her eyes. "We did it," Emma said softly. "For now," Rebecca replied, "but there'll always be another fight, another challenge." "And we'll face it," Emma said confidently, "together." Because Thunder Valley wasn't just a place. It was proof that even in a world dominated by money and power, ordinary people could make a stand, and that sometimes the strongest weapon of all was a community united by hope, trust, and the refusal to surrender. In the months following Aegis Tactical's retreat, a fragile peace settled over Thunder Valley. But Rebecca knew better than to let her guard down. Corporations like Aegis never truly gave up. They just retreated to the shadows to devise new strategies. Late one night, Sarah burst into Rebecca's kitchen with a laptop under her arm, her expression grave. "You need to see this," she said, placing the laptop on the table. On the screen were schematics for a proposed industrial complex. "Thunder Valley Development Initiative," Sarah read aloud. "Backed by the Crescent Holdings Group, they're planning to build a logistics hub here." Rebecca frowned. "That's not a logistics hub, that's a base of operations. They're trying to turn Thunder Valley into their staging ground." Jake leaned over her shoulder. "They're masking it as economic development, promising jobs, investment, infrastructure improvements. It's a classic play to win over the undecided." Emma, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "We can't let this happen. If they build that, they'll have permanent control over everything in the valley." Rebecca nodded. "Agreed, but we'll need more than protests this time. We have to fight this legally, economically, and strategically." The coalition quickly mobilized, hiring legal experts to challenge Crescent Holdings' permits. Sarah uncovered documents proving that the environmental impact assessments had been falsified. The community filed injunctions, halting construction temporarily. Meanwhile, Emma spearheaded a grassroots campaign, rallying public opposition. She organized town halls, created educational materials, and leveraged social media to expose the corporation's true intentions. But the corporations fought back. They flooded the airwaves with advertisements promising prosperity, hired lobbyists to pressure local officials, and even began targeting key coalition members with smear campaigns. One day, Rebecca found herself face-to-face with a state representative who had been influenced by Crescent Holdings. "Mrs. Winters," the politician said, his tone condescending, "this development is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your town. Don't let your personal vendetta get in the way of progress." Rebecca's eyes narrowed. "Progress isn't selling your community's soul to the highest bidder. It's building something real, something that lasts. And Thunder Valley doesn't need Crescent Holdings to do that." As the legal battle dragged on, the coalition realized they needed to hit the corporations where it hurt, their bottom line. They organized a regional boycott of Crescent Holdings subsidiaries, urging consumers to take their business elsewhere. Local farmers began coordinating with other independent suppliers, cutting off the corporation's access to key resources. Truckers refused to transport goods tied to Crescent Holdings. Hackers, sympathetic to the cause, targeted the corporation's supply chain, causing delays and disruptions. Within weeks, Crescent Holdings began hemorrhaging money. Investors grew nervous, and the company's stock price plummeted. Thunder Valley itself became a fortress of resistance. Volunteers built barricades around the proposed construction site, preventing any equipment from being brought in. Families camped out overnight, turning the area into a symbol of defiance. Artists painted murals on the barricades, depicting scenes of unity and resilience. Musicians performed concerts to boost morale. The energy in Thunder Valley was infectious, and the movement began to feel unstoppable. Rebecca, however, remained cautious. "They're not going to back down without a fight," she warned during a strategy meeting. "They'll try something drastic." Rebecca's fears were realized one stormy night when unmarked trucks rolled into Thunder Valley under the cover of darkness. Inside were private security teams equipped with surveillance drones and advanced equipment. "They're making their move," Jack reported over the radio. "They're trying to dismantle the barricades." The community sprang into action. Rebecca and her team coordinated the response, using their tactical training to outmaneuver the security teams. Sarah jammed the drones, while Jake and Emma led teams to block access points. When the security teams tried to advance, they were met with an unexpected force, dozens of local farmers on tractors, forming an impenetrable line. From the back of the line, Rebecca shouted, "This is our land, you don't belong here." The standoff lasted until dawn. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the private security teams were forced to retreat. The failed operation was the final blow to Crescent Holdings. Their shareholders, already panicked by the financial losses, demanded the project be abandoned. Within days, the corporation announced it was pulling out of Thunder Valley entirely. The news was met with celebrations across the valley. Fireworks lit up the night sky as neighbors gathered to celebrate their hard-earned victory, but Rebecca's mind was already on the future. She stood on the edge of her farm, looking out over the valley she had fought so hard to protect. "This isn't the end," she said quietly to Emma, who stood beside her. "No," Emma agreed. "But it's proof that we can win, that we're stronger together." Rebecca nodded. "And as long as we remember that, no corporation, no army, no force in the world can take this from us. Because Thunder Valley wasn't just a town. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of unity. And as long as its people stood together, it would remain unbreakable." Months after Crescent Holdings' retreat, Thunder Valley had become more than a symbol of resistance. It had evolved into a movement. Communities across the region began organizing, inspired by the valley's defiance. Rebecca often received messages from other towns seeking advice on how to stand against similar threats. But the victory came with its challenges. The scars of the battle, economic, social, and emotional, still lingered. Businesses worked hard to recover from months of financial pressure, and families had to rebuild trust in institutions that had been compromised by corporate influence. Rebecca found herself at the center of it all, a reluctant leader to a growing coalition of towns standing against corporate domination. One evening, the Thunder Valley Community Hall was packed. Leaders from neighboring towns had gathered to form what Sarah had coined the Freedom Accord. It was a loose but determined coalition of communities dedicated to mutual support and resistance against corporate overreach. "We can't fight these battles alone anymore," Sarah began, standing before the crowd. "Crescent Holdings, Aegis Tactical, they don't stop. They just change tactics, find weaker communities to target, and come back stronger." Rebecca stepped forward. "We need to do more than resist. We need to build something they can't tear down. An alliance that protects not just our towns, but the ideals we're fighting for." Discussions stretched late into the night, but by morning a plan was in place. The alliance would share resources, coordinate legal defenses, and establish communication networks to warn each other of corporate moves. Thunder Valley began focusing on strengthening its foundations. Local businesses banded together to create a cooperative, ensuring their independence from corporate supply chains. Farmers pooled resources to establish a community-owned distribution network. Emma took the lead in establishing a youth mentorship program, teaching the next generation about resilience, self-reliance, and the importance of standing together. "If we don't prepare them," she said during a meeting, "then everything we've built will fall apart when we're gone." Jake organized community defense workshops, sharing the tactical knowledge he and Rebecca had honed over the years. "This isn't about fighting," he explained to a group of volunteers. "It's about knowing how to stand your ground when the world tries to push you down." Rebecca knew that Thunder Valley's victory wasn't the end. One evening, as she sat on her porch, watching the sun dip below the mountains, Sarah joined her with a thick file in hand. "They're regrouping," Sarah said, setting the file down. Rebecca opened it, her jaw tightening as she scanned the contents. A new corporation, one even larger and more insidious than Crescent Holdings, was buying up land in the neighboring county. Their tactics were subtler, their operations more covert, but their goal was clear: to crush any resistance and expand their control. "They'll come for us eventually," Sarah said softly. Rebecca nodded. "Then we'll be ready." The people of Thunder Valley understood something the corporations never could. Strength wasn't about money, weapons, or influence. It was about the bonds between people, the shared determination to protect what mattered most. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the valley, Rebecca stood with Emma and Jake at the edge of the farm. The fields stretched out before them, a reminder of everything they had fought for. "Whatever comes next," Rebecca said, her voice steady, "we'll face it together." "And we'll win," Emma added, her mother's fire reflected in her eyes. The battle for Thunder Valley had ended, but the fight for freedom and independence was just beginning. And as long as its people stood united, no force on earth could break them. Thus, Thunder Valley became more than a place. It became a symbol, a rallying cry for all those who believed in the power of community, the value of unity, and the unshakable truth that some things can never be bought, controlled, or conquered. Months turned into a year, and the ripple effect of Thunder Valley's defiance spread far beyond the region. Communities across the country began organizing, drawing inspiration from Rebecca and her team. Local alliances turned into regional networks, and soon a national movement began to take shape. The Freedom Accord evolved into the Independent Communities Network, ICN, a grassroots coalition committed to resisting corporate overreach and fostering self-reliance. Rebecca reluctantly accepted the role of one of the network's key advisors. "I didn't ask for this," she often told Sarah, who had taken on the role of ICN's chief strategist. "No one asks to lead a revolution," Sarah replied with a sly grin. "But here we are." The ICN operated with the same principles that had guided Thunder Valley: transparency, mutual aid, and the belief that power belonged in the hands of the people. They launched legal battles to challenge corporate monopolies, created open-source resources for community defense, and built systems to bypass corporate-controlled infrastructure. Jake became the face of ICN's defensive arm, training local militias in non-lethal tactics to protect their communities. Emma took charge of outreach, traveling to schools and town halls to educate the next generation. "The fight doesn't end with us," she would say. "We're planting seeds for something bigger." The corporations didn't take the growing resistance lightly. Crescent Holdings may have been driven out of Thunder Valley, but its parent company, Orion Consolidated, began to take notice. Unlike Crescent, Orion operated on a global scale, with tentacles in everything from energy to technology. Orion's approach was far more insidious. They infiltrated communities by funding charitable initiatives and offering essential services under the guise of goodwill. When those efforts failed, they leaned on their political connections to push legislation favoring privatization and deregulation. In Thunder Valley, the first signs of Orion's retaliation came quietly. Local supply chains were disrupted, with corporate distributors refusing to sell goods to cooperative-owned businesses. Infrastructure projects were delayed as contractors mysteriously backed out. Even the town's internet service became unreliable, with outages suspiciously coinciding with ICN meetings. "They're playing the long game," Sarah warned during a late-night strategy session. "They're not just trying to take us down, they're trying to make life so hard for us that we fold under the pressure." But Thunder Valley didn't fold. Instead, the community adapted. When corporate distributors refused to sell supplies, they turned to barter and trade. When the internet became unreliable, they built their own mesh network using open-source technology to stay connected. Every obstacle became an opportunity to innovate and strengthen their independence. The tipping point came when Orion Consolidated began lobbying for a federal bill that would privatize emergency services nationwide. The bill was framed as a cost-saving measure, but its true purpose was clear: to dismantle public safety infrastructure and replace it with for-profit contractors. Rebecca and the ICN recognized the threat immediately. If the bill passed, it would give corporations like Orion the legal authority to dominate communities across the country. Thunder Valley became the epicenter of the resistance. The ICN organized protests, rallies, and town hall meetings to raise awareness about the bill's implications. Rebecca herself traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress, her voice calm but unyielding as she detailed the consequences of privatized security. "Security isn't a product you can sell," she told the committee. "It's a responsibility we all share. When you hand that responsibility over to corporations, you're not just selling services, you're selling control. And once you've given it away, you'll never get it back." The testimony went viral, sparking a wave of nationwide protests. Communities that had once been silent found their voices, joining the fight against the bill. As the vote on the bill approached, Orion, consolidated, unleashed its full power. Smear campaigns targeted Rebecca and other ICN leaders, painting them as radicals. Private investigators harassed ICN members, and corporate-funded media outlets dismissed the movement as naive and misguided. But the ICN had prepared for this. Sarah's team had collected mountains of evidence tying Orion to illegal activities, from bribing politicians to staging crises for profit. Just days before the vote, the ICN released the evidence to the public. The backlash was immediate. Protests erupted outside Orion's headquarters, and several politicians withdrew their support for the bill under public pressure. When the vote finally came, the bill was defeated by a narrow margin. It was a victory, but Rebecca knew it was only a battle in a much larger war. Years later, Thunder Valley was unrecognizable, not because it had changed, but because it had inspired so many others to follow its example. The ICN had grown into a national force, with communities across the country reclaiming their independence. Rebecca had stepped back from the spotlight, spending her days tending to the farm with Emma and Jake. But her name was still spoken with reverence by those who remembered how it all began. One evening, as Rebecca walked through the fields, she paused to look out over the valley. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the land she had fought so hard to protect. Emma joined her, a new generation of ICN leaders behind her. "They're asking for you at the hall," she said. "Another town wants advice on organizing." Rebecca smiled. "Let them know I'll be there tomorrow. Tonight I just want to watch the sunset." Because Thunder Valley's greatest lesson wasn't just about resistance, it was about hope, about the idea that no matter how powerful the forces against you might seem, ordinary people could stand together and shape their own future. And as long as people remembered that, there would always be another Thunder Valley ready to rise. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.